Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, that is Shaveta Malhotra. So today in this video we will discuss about the another type of variable, that is static variable. So in the previous video we have covered the instance variable. So today we will discuss about the static variable. Again, this is the most important and mostly asked topic in the interview, and so let's get started. Same like the instance variable, here we have the few points and we will discuss one by one. So the static variable, that is also known as the properties of an object, or you can say fields of a class, right? So static variables are also known as the class level variables. What does it mean? Why this is known as the class level variable? We will discuss later. So, and global variables. Like the instance variable, the global variables are those variables that can be accessible anywhere. Okay, so the next point is declaration. So where we can declare such kind of variables or initialize those variables. So we can declare the static variable inside the class and outside the method, same like as instance variable. So here the position for the static variable declaration is this. Here we can create a new variable, let's say int I. If you are not using the static keyword, that would be instance variable, but for the static variable we have to use static keyword. Okay, so static keyword is, again we have the one complete concept, like which things we can make the static, we will discuss in the upcoming videos. So here to make a variable static, just we need to use the static keyword. Okay, now moving to the next one, initialization. So do we need to initialize these variables? As you can see, there is no compilation error. That means these variables doesn't require any value, right? If let's say you are not providing any value, you are not initializing this variable, so by default JVM will assign some value according to their data type, right? If let's say I is the integer type variable, so default value would be 0. If let's say I'm using one static boolean type variable, so by default its value would be false. Sorry, I have to write the variable name. Okay, so if let's say we are creating the string type variable, so by default its value would be null, right? So there is no need to initialize such kind of variable at the time of declaration, correct? Now moving to the next one, accessibility, like where we can access these variable and how we can access these variable. So as we know, the main method is a static method, right? Because from this method the JVM starts the execution. So how we can access these variable in static method? Not only in the main method, if you are creating your own user defined static method, so definitely you can access these variables. But how? Let's see. So this is a static method. So here I'm just trying to print these variables directly without using any object, and here you can see there is no compilation error. Hence proof the static members, it doesn't require any object, right? So that's why it is known as the class level variables, because there is no need to create an object of a class to access these variables or any static member. It could be variable, it could be any method. Okay, so here we are just directly using the variable name in the static area, or you can see in the static method. So let me just print all these three variables and we'll check the output, like what it will display the values. So here let me just execute the code. So according to their data type, it will display the values. So here you can see the value of I is 0, B is of the boolean type variable, so the by default value is false. For the ST the value is null. Okay, so if let's say you want to assign some value to these variable, again like in the instance variable we discussed, if you want to assign some value or you want to access those variable in the static method, definitely we can use by using the class object, right? But in that case there is no need to create any object of a class. So here if let's say I'm trying to change the value of variables and I'm using testing, and let me just again execute the code, and here you can see the values whatever is provided by the user. Static method is that method which doesn't has static keyword. Okay, so here you can see, just here we can just write non-static method. Let me just print all these variables here. If let's say I'm just removing the values, so again here you can see there is no compilation error, right? So that means you can access the static variables directly within the same class, either that is a static method or the non-static method. No object creation is required. So now the next point is the value of a static variable doesn't varies as we create the different number of objects of a class. So just to differentiate between the instance variable and the static variables, we are considering this point, like we will create an object of a class. But for the static variable, it clearly mentioned in the Java, no need to create an object of a class. Just to confirm, just to explain like how the value of static variable doesn't varies or doesn't change. Okay, so let me just create an object of this class. Okay, let's comment it out. So here I'm creating an object of class. So here I have created 3 objects, correct? So in that case, let me just access the I variable with all these 3 objects by using dot, right? And if I execute the code, and here you can see the value of variable for all the object is 0, right? Because we are not assigning any value to the I variable. Now, if I try to change the value of variable I with 100, now what happens? Will it change the value of I for SV2, for the SV3 or not? And here we can see the value will be same for all the object, right? So if let's say if one object is changing the value of variable I, that will also be changed for the other object. Mean to say it doesn't create a different copy for all the objects. For the static members, they always share the memory. If let's say we have created 3 objects, right, that is SV1, SV2 and SV3. These are the 3 objects, right? And here we have one static variable. We are using the static keyword, that's why this is the static variable, and initially its value is, let's say we have set the value 10. Okay, so now in that case, for the object 1, the value of I is equal to 10. Now it will not create a different copy for all the objects. So S1 is point out to this particular variable. This is the static variable, and here you can say the memory location. So static variables always stored in the static area. It having the separate memory location, that is known as the static memory area. Correct? For the SV2, again SV2 is also pointing out to the same location. SV3 is also point out to the same location. We have seen in the instance variable, so it generates the separate copy for each and every object, but for all these variable, for the static members, it doesn't create the separate copy for each and every object. There is the one single copy which shares the memory, and everyone is pointing out to that particular memory location. Just for the understanding, we are creating the object, right? Now if let's say the one object, this object is deciding to change the value of I variable, so the location is 1 only, right? So SV2 is trying to change the value from 10 to 20. Now what happens? The rest of the object SV1 and SV3, they are also pointing out to the same location. So value for the SV1 dot I would be also 20, and for SV3 the value of I would also be 20. So that's why we always say the static members share the memory, static variables share the memory, so there is no need to create an object. So let's understand this concept with a real life example. As we discussed in the instance variable, if let's say we have one teacher and there are n number of students, right, and the teacher has distributed the separate paper to each and every student, that was the concept of instance variable. But over here now the teacher has only one single paper, right? You can say, if let's say the S1 person, it has marked something or write something on this paper, now the next, if S2 will use this paper, that will use the updated paper by the student 1 where we have written something, right? If let's say S2 is writing something on the paper, S2 is writing something on the paper, and if S3 will use this paper, so it got the updated result like S2 whatever the written by the S2 person. In short, mean to say, there is one single paper, and if the one person is changing the value, that will be changed for rest of the object, that will be changed for everyone, for all the objects. I is changed by SV2 with the 400. Now let's see the output. So in that case, if I'm trying to execute this code, so here initially SV1 has changed the value, so that is 200. Then SV2 has changed the value, it will change for all the objects, for SV1, for SV2 as well as SV3. Correct? So this is the point where the value of static members or the static variables, you can say, doesn't vary as we create the different number of objects. Why this is known as the class level members or class level variables? As we discussed, these variables doesn't require any object, right? And we are saying the by default value is according to their data type, and JVM initialize those. This initialization and memory allocation happens at the time of class loading. As we know, whenever we compile the code, we get the byte code with the extension .class, and when the JVM or the interpreter load that class, so firstly it will check all the static things, all the static variables, static methods, or if there is any static class that allocate the memory, and that special memory area is known as the static memory, right? Instance variable, as we discussed, there is the separate memory area that is known as heap memory, but in case of the static members, the memory is static memory. And this is the most important question asked in the interview. So what things you have to explain first? And this is very important question, and many times asked in the interview. What is the difference between the instance variable or static variable, or what is the static variable? So here you can mention the main points, like static variables are known as the class level variables. Why this is known as the class level variables? Because initialization and the memory allocation happens at the time of class loading, and there is no need to create an object of a class, and static members always share the memory, okay? And the memory area for the static member is static memory area. And the most important point, the value of instance variable doesn't vary as we create the different number of objects, and you can explain this thing by using this example where you have to create the one static variable, you can create the number of objects, and by using these variable and by initializing those variable, you can access and explain like how they share the memory, right? How its values doesn't vary. Then later on you can cover all these things, like in the static area we can access how these variables, in non-static area how we can access, and everything. Rest of the points you can cover later on. Correct? I hope this thing is clear to everyone. If you like the video, please like, share and subscribe my channel. Thank you so much. Bye bye. Take care.